Order, order. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee. We return this morning to our inquiry in relation to fisheries and the marine environment, and also, in part, an accountability section in relation to the arm's length bodies of the department. We are pleased to be joined this morning by representatives from the Crown Estate, Seafish and the Marine Management Organisation. Ladies and gentlemen, just for the benefit of those following our proceedings and for our own official record, can I invite you to introduce yourselves to the committee?
Absolutely. Good morning, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Olivia Thomas, and I am the Head of Planning and Technical as part of Marine's leadership at the Crown Estate.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here. My name is Willis. I'm the Interim Chief Executive at the Marine Management Organisation.
Hi, good morning. I'm Colin Faulkner. I'm Chief Exec of Seafish. I've been relatively new in post since the 12th of January, but previously I was Head of International Fisheries in DEFRA.
Okay, well, good morning. We're grateful to you for your attendance and your assistance for the work of the committee. Just start with a very broad question from you all, from the benefit of your organisation's vantage points. Just a minute or two on the biggest challenges that fishing and the marine sectors are going to encounter in the next 5 years. Olivia, we'll start with you again, if I can.
Thank you. So if I start with the Crown Estate's responsibilities, we have a statutory duty to enhance the value of the estate on behalf of the nation for the long term. In the marine context, what that means and why I'm here is those duties apply to almost the entire seabed around England, Wales and Northern Ireland. We look to manage these responsibly for the long term, and we have a demonstrable history of doing so through supporting the delivery of some of the key priorities on the marine environment, whether that's the development of offshore wind and the growth of other sectors, but importantly, enabling nature to recover alongside it. I think in terms of the challenges, the sea space demand's never been greater. I actually saw a wonderful fact around the fact that even out to 2050, we're looking at a 10 times growth in that demand. And it's been exponential. Whether that's for natural resources, food security, energy security, it's clear that that squeeze and there is a real challenge around the constraint in the space. And we've engaged the fisheries sector over the last 15 years on some of those common challenges and how to work in the marine environment. And we really want to invest and develop our understanding and our evidence base and our data to support the coordinated way forward in how we deliver and support shared outcomes rather than racing towards uncertainty with respect to how projects might work together. So in the immediate future, when I think about the challenges for the Crown Estate, we'll need to take decisions in a coordinated way. We're seeking to develop our marine delivery route map, an interactive digital platform that will help to explore and plan future needs, inform our decision-making and hopefully support the decision-making of others as well.
Quite a lot to unpack there. We'll come back to that. Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. So the role of the MMO is that we are England's principal marine regulator and marine manager. We regulate and manage what happens in England's seas, everything from how people fish to what happens in marine protected areas. We kind of support all coastal and marine development where we can, and we also have a real job in terms of balancing sustainable development with community and supply chain. And we build on the resilience, we try to build on the resilience of coastal communities in the marine environment. I think to try and contextualise an organisation of 500 people, what we kind of do achieve and what we contribute to just in economic and protection terms, we support fish exports in the tune of 1.7 billion as part of that the UK economy. We support 96 gigawatts of offshore wind and are supporting the growth in offshore wind. We are also responsible for the 6 marine plan areas, which covers 230,000 kilometres squared of space. It's quite a big space to manage. And obviously we've got 52 marine protected areas. The stakes are high for balancing these needs, so turning to the challenges, I don't want to kind of repeat what Olivia set out. competing for space in the marine environment is ever increasing. We have competing regulations. We've got new regulations which need to come forward. And obviously there is high ambition around reform agenda. And we have many stakeholders with all very high interest in that environment.
Okay. And Colin, Seafish.
Yeah, thank you. Seafish is a slightly different remit, perhaps, from Crown Estate and from the MMO. Well, first, we are a public body, obviously, but we operate across the UK rather than solely in England. Our role is to support seafood industries and to improve their efficiency where we can. And I deliberately say industries because we work right across the supply chain. On your point about challenges and opportunities, in the catching sector, obviously, spatial squeeze remains a perennial concern of the sector, but also recruitment challenges are significant. Getting labour and well-trained labour and well-trained crew is a significant challenge for the sector. But also some of the perennial issues around safety, and Seafish is heavily involved in trying to improve safety and making sure that fishing is, as you will know, an incredibly dangerous occupation, and Seafish has for many, many years worked with the MCA on improving that safety regime. Briefly, just on the processing sector as well, significant challenges and, as ever, opportunities there. Like any business, they're operating in an environment where they see their costs rising. And again, around the import-export regime for the processing sector, there are challenges and opportunities arising out of the upcoming SPS agreement. But also on the import side, challenges around declining quotas, particularly of whitefish stocks from primary sources of whitefish stocks in the Arctic and so on. Which are squeezing supply to the UK market. But as ever, with opportunities come with challenges come opportunities, and Seafish will play our part in rising to those opportunities.
Right. Well, can I just drill down a bit into the top lines? We'll go into the areas in some more detail as we move on. Olivia, first of all, you've got 3 strategic pillars, have you not?
We have 4.
Remind me?
We seek to generate value across 4 broad lenses. So the social, environmental, decarbonisation, and our financial returns.
So it's net zero in energy, security, nature and biodiversity, and thriving communities. I didn't hear anything from you about your thriving communities when you were giving your introductory comments there. How do you feel you manage the balance between that and the other pillars?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, it's a critical part of how we work and how we consider our decision making. We recognise certainly with the marine space that there is an onshore interaction and an interaction with coastal communities as well, and it's an important part of how we engage in taking our decisions.
How do you know when a community is thriving?
We work closely with local partners and other organisations to look at what priorities particular communities have. I wouldn't say we've got to a point where we've met that objective. It's a big ambition to support thriving communities, and part of that is the fisheries and the massive contribution they make to coastal communities around the UK.
I mean, you own the seabed. You also do some of the holding of the ring. You've got flow and the wet renewables sector. Do you think you manage to balance the competing demands between what these sectors give you financially and fishing industry, which actually doesn't really give you anything at all financially? Because they're in the sea, not the seabed. We
recognise that fisheries play a vital part in the marine environment, and we can't deliver in our role of generating value without considering all those sectors and the contributions they make. When it comes to how we're building our marine delivery route map, we're engaging extensively with Fisheries to make sure that we can reflect their interests and their priorities in our decision making. So as we drive value, we are incorporating that understanding of where those priorities areas are for Fisheries. And
where's the community that you're most proud of the impact that you've made then with your work?
we have an extensive amount of work we're doing across various locations.
Just give me one. Give me the one you're most proud of.
I can give you the example of the Celtic Sea and the work that we've done for very innovative floating offshore wind technology. It's our most recent leasing round, as we describe it, for offshore wind.
And for the fishing communities there, what has that meant?
So for when we recognise that the Celtic Sea doesn't have floating wind development, it's an important region for Wales, for England, for the UK. We worked collaboratively with the fishing sector in designing what we would bring forward for offshore wind. We ran a virtual mapping project led by the fisheries sector to look at where the prime areas were for fisheries. And we also built in obligations around social value and considerations of how future wind developers would work with communities around the Celtic Sea to support and help enhance. And we've invested in a supply chain accelerator as well, in order to, again, stimulate that economic growth in coastal communities associated with the marine space.
I'm not hearing the name of a town or a village.
I can come back with some specific towns and villages that we've engaged with across the southwest. We've been quayside in the southwest, in the northeast, and most recently in Pembrokeshire in North Wales as well.
On reflection, do you think you're as effective as you might be in the balance between your three pillars?
I think it's a work in progress, and it's absolutely fair to reflect that. And we're looking broadly at how we can really build out an understanding of priorities. We recognise that one size doesn't fit all for coastal communities, so it's the work that's in train at the moment to engage and make sure that we are reflecting the needs of particular communities in particular geographic locations.
I mean, the catching sector and the fishing industry feel that they're the ones who are always getting squeezed out. You've got an opportunity, because you own it and because you're partly involved in the management of it, to do something about that. Do you feel you do as much as you could?
I feel we are absolutely focused on engaging with the sectors across a wide range of fish producers associations, and we'll continue to improve in that space.
So, at what point will we see the work in progress as a completed work that we can judge then?
In us sharing our digital tools, so we're looking to share the platform publicly, we'll be able to engage with everyone over the coming years on the progress we're making and how we're reflecting others' interests through route mapping the decisions that we then subsequently take.
Okay, Jane, I'll come back to you at the end if that's okay. Michelle, the Fisheries Minister told us that it's for the MMO to have a presence, and I quote her directly, at every port for every landing of every catch. What role do you have in ports, and do you have the capacity to fulfil this role that the Fisheries Minister has described to us?
So the MMO is located around, we cover the whole of the English coast. That doesn't mean we're based in every single port. It just means that we have offices in a location where within a distance that we can achieve that. We do a lot of engagement around the coast. We have marine officers who deal with the industry and coastal communities on a day-to-day basis. More recently, over the last few years, certainly since exit, we've run the regional fisheries groups, which has been a really insightful and energised way to engage with the community. But actually, it supported us with consultations like Stage 1 and Stage 2 marine protected areas. We do drop-in sessions, but it also allows us, because what isn't in MMO's remit is the role of the inshore fisheries conservation authorities, the IFCAs, and you've got two regulators in the same place. We have to work together in those communities to.
The IFCAs do up to the 6 mile limit, and then you're on your own from 6 to 12.
It's the arbitrary boundary lines, but it just reflects, I guess, some of the differences in regulation.
And in that, then, you're responsible for the fisheries management plans.
We are. We deal with fisheries management impacts, but we also get engaged because obviously we've got marine protected areas that interplay within the coast, and we have marine planners, and we offer a grant service, which I know you'll be familiar with, and again we provide more like one-to-one support. Do
you feel you've been undermined by the negotiations at the end of last year in relation to access and management from the European Union?
I don't have an personal opinion or an organisational position on that. Ministers are still working through, and the policy teams are still working through the outcome of the negotiations, which kind of finished through.
But I mean, it was agreed that the UK would follow EU fisheries management regulations, was it not?
It was, but we're still working through what those conditions mean, and we do have time. So to be fair, those negotiations concluded. We have probably about 6 months to impact them, and we'll be working very closely with the industry on that. And as we all know, we can kind of work through constraints and remedies to that. But I think I couldn't comment until we work through the detail of it.
How long have you been with the MMO?
I've been with MMO for 15 years.
Right. Have you ever seen another occasion where you saw changes of the rules in this way at a year end with no warning coming from the EU?
Haven't, no.
So, why was it different this time, do you know?
I don't know why it was different this time.
You asked?
Not yet.
It's a pretty it's one of the most important functions that your organisation does. You've had the rug pulled out of you by your political masters. Idle curiosity at least. What on earth are you doing here?
If I can qualify my statement, I haven't yet asked why the technical measures were introduced at a late stage, because we've been supporting and working through the outcome with DEFRA policy colleagues, and that has been the focus of the organisation's intent, really, to resolve the fisheries management issues that have come, that we need to implement quite quickly and to work through what those measures mean in practice. It's not been because we don't care, so I should qualify that for the record.
I'm sure you do. I mean, look, it's your career, isn't it?
It is. Yes.
But it wasn't your decision either.
No.
Because I mean, one of the concerns is actually that the enforcement of the regulations to which we've agreed is not going to be the same in the EU as it is going to be in the UK, is it? It's going to be more strict in the UK than it is in the EU, so it's not even a reciprocal arrangement. Does that seem sensible?
I think until we work through the detail, Chair, I couldn't really comment. I do understand the challenges and the complexity of competing regulatory regimes, and obviously the EU reserve the right to change the control regs in practical terms.
Fishing boats going to sea are going to have to buy bigger nets, aren't they? When does that come into force?
My understanding is there's still a 6-month window in which we've got to work through the detail of that.
Sorry, I missed that bit there.
My understanding is there's still a 6-month window.
You've got a 6-month window.
To understand what the ramifications for that are, and that's what we're focused on at the moment.
Right. And would you perhaps keep us informed of what you're able to do there? And I mean, in general, one of the things that we need to do for the health of stocks inshore is to keep bigger boats out, isn't it?
It is.
But extending the trade and cooperation agreement for 12 years means that we've got 12 years where we can actually control what comes into our waters, doesn't it?
I think it gives us the opportunity through the fisheries management plans that we are developing to help better manage what activity happens in our waters. And the 12-year will give certainty from an economic perspective. I still think there is an opportunity to continue that engagement and develop. We do share the waters around the UK, and we do share the waters between ourselves and Europe. And I think having a better relationship with Europe to do that effectively, I think, is probably what's needed, and we'll work through that.
Right. I've got some questions in relation to MPs, but we're going to come back to that at a later stage. Colin, good morning and congratulations. You came into post on the 1st of January, effectively, is that right?
12th of January.
12th of July, right. Is it congratulations?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's a difficult time for the agency, isn't it? For Seafish, isn't it? You wanted an increase in your levy. You've not had one. You've had to make significant cuts to your management team.
So we have, well, I think the first thing to say is, look, Seafish has got a really bright future in the same way that the UK fishing industry has a bright future. And those two things go together.
That's a delightfully ambiguous way of putting it.
So those two things go hand in hand. Seafish has to cut its coat according to its cloth, fundamentally. It's funded by a levy on the first point of sale of seafood, and that levy, the receipts from that levy have been declining. They've dropped from about 8.5 million in 2019-20 to 7.1 million in 24-25. So we have to cut our coat according to our cloth. So, look, the board has given us a very clear, the board's given the organisation a very clear steer on the strategic priorities for the organisation, and we'll be taking those priorities forward. It does mean that we have to step back from some very specific activities within the fisheries management space, and we're going through that process at the moment of defining exactly what that looks like in terms of the consequences for the organisation. But we're also taking the opportunity to slim back some of our support functions in the organisation as well, to make sure that we can live within our means, frankly. And that's what you would expect any organisation to do.
Do you think you could have taken or done more to bring the industry with you in meeting these challenges?
So I will probably caveat most of my answers here with I've been here for 2 weeks and was not involved in that decision-making process last autumn.
You have the benefit of a fresh pair of eyes then.
Exactly, and certainly looking forward, I will be very, very keen to make sure that levy payers and others in the industry have their opportunity to feed into that process of redesigning Seafish's role in the fisheries management world. I think it is important to say that we are still heavily involved in the management of fisheries in the UK. We maybe have stepped back from the specific work on fisheries management plans, not least because there are many organisations in that space, but we are still heavily involved in the management of fisheries in the UK, whether that's on safety, whether that's on training, whether that's on improving the economic analysis of the fleet, whether that's on geospatial analysis of the catching sector's work, or on fishing gear technology. We're still heavily involved in the fisheries management space.
Have you seen the letter signed by the 32 different fishing and seafood organisations complaining about the way these things have been done?
I have indeed, and our board
chair has replied. Achievement. I can't think of many occasions where we've been able to bring together 32 organisations. You've united the industry there.
Well, I suppose I worked in DEFRA for a long time, so I've seen a number of letters a number of similar letters.
No, but I mean, look, the serious point here is that they see this as coming halfway through your 23 to 28 corporate plan. You've got a reduced communications capacity, and you're disbanding your fisheries management team. Now, these are all big, chunky decisions to have made, and they're saying it was made without any consultation with them, and they, after all, at the end of the day, are the levy payers.
So I'm told that there were informal discussions with industry as those decisions were being taken last autumn. I wasn't party to those informal discussions, but I'm told by colleagues that there were some discussions. There was not a formal consultation process. You're right.
Well, I mean, look, just on that point, as it happens, I was at the NFFO AGM the morning when you made the announcement. They were completely blindsided. So, I mean, what does informal consultation mean in this context?
Look, I'm not fully cited in all of those discussions. I wasn't party to them. I understand.
I mean, as a levy-funded organisation, relationship with the industry is surely important to you. You're new in this particular role, but you've been around the fisheries management space for quite some time. Is this something that you're going to be getting a grip on?
Look, the role of the catching sector, the processing sector and the aquaculture sector is vitally important for defining Seafish's work in the future, and I will certainly be making sure that their voice is heard as amply and as regularly as possible in our work.
When you mentioned your board there, have you got any fishermen in your board?
Yes, there are.
There
are. From memory, there are individuals who have worked in the fishing industry. They may not be. I think one of them is an active fisherman currently, but others have been in the fishing sector for many years.
Okay. You maybe give us some chapter and verse on that in correspondence later on.
Happy to do so.
Right. Okay, Jean, you wanted to come in at this point.
Yes, I did. I'm a Cornish MP, so the Crown Estate is going to be and has been already really important to my area over the next, hopefully, quite a number of years. And I've already seen a lot of change since becoming an MP with the way that the Crown Estate have been working with us and with the local area, and it's positive. So when we first were elected, it did seem that most of those leasing rounds were about price. And definitely now, with this Supply Chains Accelerator Fund, there is, and the social value that are going into the leases, there is change, and that's really positive. So I suppose there are a couple of things that I'd ask out of that, relating to your Thriving Communities aim. One is that there's been some progress made, but there's a lot further that could be gone on social value and dealing with those communities. And I understand the Supply Chains Accelerator Fund, that's great, but of course there's much more to the community than the supply chain for floating offshore wind. So it's how you intend to progress that social value, because the kind of the clause is about 10% of the workforce being NEETs and apprenticeships and that sort of thing is good, but it's a very small start to a very big job, because of course there's a lot of money to be made out of those leases as well. And the other thing was about fishing particularly, because in previous rounds of in the Celtic Sea, the map that was put out scared fishers half to death. It was just a huge bundle of dots, which was it was a potential, but it was never going to be the reality. And I think that kind of miscommunication was really upsetting to a lot of fishers. So I know that now that's been corrected, and you talked about, up to a point, you talked about an interactive digital platform. So my question is, from now on, how are you going to be interacting with the fishing communities in particular, and that platform? Will that be the tool that will be done through? How will that interaction be done, and how will fishing be taken fully into consideration?
Thank you for that question. So with respects to the social value commitments, absolutely, they're a work in progress. We see the opportunity now, in particular as to how we have placed commitments on the developers who will take on those project locations. There are 6 different types of social value plan incorporated into those commitments, and we're working to support them directly to realise the benefits for the communities. And you talked to some of that, so apprenticeships being part of it, the not in education, employment and training planning, skills development plans, community impact plans, community engagement plans and volunteering plans.
Of course, in other countries, developers are very used to being asked to do an awful lot in the communities that they're working with. They will go and embed themselves in the community. They will have headquarters, that kind of thing. I mean, is that what you envisage the Crown Estate doing in the long term?
Well,
putting those in the lease, like they do in other places.
Thank you. Yeah, so we will work with our developers on the scale of their plans and where there are opportunities to invest to support more strategically for an area, then we absolutely will do. With respects to route map, the evidence base underneath it is critical. So some of the evidence that we've commissioned is through our offshore wind evidence and change programme, our £50 million commitment. And that's working directly with fisheries, including the Cornish Fish Producers Association, to look at fisheries sensitivity and displacement mapping. Lots of things have long technical acronyms, apologies, but to really then look at the specifics for a region or a location and what those impacts might look like for the community themselves. So to answer your question around route map, yes, we do want to use that, platform to showcase and then realise where the future opportunities might be and use it to guide our decision making. But the evidence underneath it is absolutely critical, and that has to be a shared evidence base, and that's where we want to work collaboratively with the fisheries, but also my colleagues on the panel as well, to make sure that we've got that agreed and aligned evidence base.
I mean, I would echo the Chair's point that at the end of these processes, it would be good if you could point to certain communities and say, this is where the Crown Estate has made a difference, not just to supply chains, but to fishing communities as well.
Okay, we're going to look at the resourcing of both the MMO and the Crown Estate. Henry, you're going to lead the questioning on this.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start, Michelle, on the report that we had last summer from the Office for Environmental Protection, and the concerns that they raised about the lack of transparency. I mean, to sort of, there's no minimum requirements for the frequencies of inspections, no requirement to publish information about your inspection activities, no express statutory duty requiring you to conduct inspections. Can you provide a commitment of your organisation moving forward that you will publish data on this work?
So, yes, I can. If I can just elaborate, though. So the approach that we take for control enforcement, whether it's for marine licensing or for fisheries management, is really one around education and facilitation, because we try to get the right behaviours. People want to do the right things. So a lot of our resourcing
but people aren't going to do the right things if you're only inspecting 10% of the marine licences.
Yes, if I could just elaborate, because some applicants will send in their own data for us to do that assessment on. So the transparency of publication, I think, is something we can definitely do better on and will take away. But what I would also say is we do take a risk-based approach, and that's just the way in which we have to manage our capacity in order to ensure that we inspect those activities which are higher risk to either damage or, I guess, non-compliance. And we do that, and we take that intelligence from data that we do get from local data in the community, but also from trends and behaviours that we collect the data in from applicants and from the other activities that we are there to regulate. But we can go further, and I think we'll take that away and come back to the committee with a proposal on what that could look like.
Thank you. On the point about capacity, I think you told the Environmental Audit Committee recently about your concerns over churn of staff. Yeah. Does that go to the point that you're making around capacity in respect of personnel, lack of personnel to carry out this important work?
So it's not a recruitment and retention issue in so much as we can recruit well. It's about skills and capability. So from an MMO perspective, currently our attrition rate's stable. We are treating it roughly around 11%. That's kind of quite normal in organisations. But where we struggle, and it still remains an issue that is unresolved, is that particularly for our skilled staff in marine licensing, they will move to the private sector, to the energy companies and port sector, because they offer better wages than we can provide them with. However, you'll remember that the department and the previous Secretary of State had commissioned the Corrie Review. We are working through recommendations that were in the Corrie Review to look at other ways in which we can incentivise people to stay with the organisation. And we are working with the sectors to try and work through better ways of interchange and secondment that balance the need of both, so we can at least retain the skills and kind of have that better sharing of knowledge. But it was largely in the marine licensing sector that we suffer that level of attrition.
Because you have spent more, I think it was a sort of a net expenditure for 23-24 was 48, which is a 48.8 million, is 14% increase. So in respect of, there's more money being spent. It just, is that not filtering through to the capacity?
So the capacity gets deployed across the broad remit of the organisation. So the organisation delivers some new policy priorities which are in the throw of being implemented. So some of the additional funding we have that comes through the MMO is for development and implement new policy priorities, such as
marine licences aren't a priority.
They are a priority, but part of them are paid. The marine licensing is paid substantively through fees and charges. That is an obligation that we have to do under managing public money. Those fees are under revision, and we are waiting to to implement the new revision to fees and charges. That consultation for the fee revision will have completed in the last year, and we're just waiting for those consultation responses to be addressed. That will allow us to at least better get cost recovery, more reflective of the time we spend. So we have to, again, marry up our resources and capacity to the fees and charges we're able to charge, and the distribution of all of the broad duties that we have to do in the MMO.
Thank you. Can I move on to Olivia in respect of your work with the Crown Estate? I mean, I think you've been at the Crown Estate for 18 years, is that right?
Yes.
So you've seen a huge change over that period of time, and I was just wondering what your reflections were about recent changes that have happened. I mean, you've had a lot of things going on in the organisation recently with the floating wind. I was wondering what your reflections are, seeing it from the inside, being on the inside.
Thank you. Yes, so as I joined, we saw the formation of the Marine Management Organisation and the guiding development of the statutory marine plans, and that's been really beneficial in helping to support priorities across the UK marine space. Actually, as you've said, that needs and demands over the sea space are multiple, whether that's food security, energy security increasingly, and we see nature at a tipping point, so needing to really look to enhance nature recovery as well.
In terms of internally, I mean, you've doubled your headcount, is that right, is it Crown Estate? In terms of the number of people that the organisation's employing?
That's changed over the course of the time that I have been there. But
in terms of from when you began to where you are now, in terms of it, internally, you're seeing loads more people working in the organisation, different changing culture. What can you reflect on?
Absolutely. So with respect to our strategy and how that guides us, the ability to look at value broadly has really come to focus over the last 5 to 10 years. And so the opportunity for us to invest in things like our digital platforms and our capabilities in recognising that we need to understand the sea space to take our decisions, that's absolutely where I've seen most of the evolution of the Crown Estate and how we work. It's been the breadth of how we consider value and how we can invest to make sure we have the right capabilities in place to take decisions for the long term.
Do you think, in the context of what we've been talking about, do you think the Crown Estate's been forced into a lot of these positions in respect of social value, focusing on communities? I mean, you didn't mention communities at the beginning of your opening statement. Is this something of an imposition to your organisation?
It's the core of our strategy. So I think it's recognising that if we're demonstrably to show sustainable action in the land and the marine assets that we manage, then we have to consider people and places as part of that. And actually that interconnection between the offshore and the onshore is very much part of what we're trying to do with using route map and building an evidence base so we can start to see where those interactions are.
Yeah, I mean, you've alluded to as well about leasing in respect of the energy and floating wind, and you have, as you set out earlier, you have different range of priorities with thriving community, decarbonisation, growth. But I mean, when you get down into it, isn't it the case that really it's about extracting fees? I mean, Greenpeace have threatened to take you to court, I think, in respect of the money that you're extracting from those leases. I mean, that you're not focusing on climate change initiatives. You're not focusing on those local communities. Really, it's about maximising your own revenue, isn't it?
The value creation framework we use to guide our decision making absolutely considers beyond the financial. So we do think about nature and decarbonisation as part of that, alongside thriving communities. So we do take decisions that go beyond their financial consideration. Ultimately, our net revenue profits are for the benefit of the public, and we are accountable to Parliament in that way, but we are absolutely guided by our value creation in the way that we can and are enabled to consider value more broadly than just a financial return, and actually how we invest and reinvest in the systems thinking and the development of route map is testament to how we want to be thinking about value more broadly and making sure that our impact is also beyond just the financial return that we make to Treasury.
And can you remind the committee how much money sits with Treasury and how much ends up in with the Crown?
I can't right now. I'm happy to follow up in writing on that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Just this business of maximising revenue. You take a lot of money from people laying cables in the seabed. How do you work out what an appropriate rent is for that?
We work closely with the market and engage the market on demand.
Who else leases seabed to cable layers?
Solely us around
the market,
England and
aren't
Wales.
you?
Sorry, it's solely us around England, Wales and Northern Ireland, but we work closely with government and those who are wishing to use the seabed. Our responsibilities only extend to 12 nautical miles, so it's important that we have strong engagement on understanding the remainder of that.
You still charge aquaculture on the basis of turnover?
Sorry, was that...
Do you still charge rents to aquaculture interests on the basis of turnover? You certainly used to.
I'd need to confirm on the charging mechanisms for aquaculture.
Okay. And Michelle, if I could just come briefly to you before we move on. Your annual report used to publish the number of inspections and outcomes. You don't do that anymore. Is that correct?
The performance report should reflect does reflect key performance indicators for the organisation on the general number of inspections we do and the outcomes we're trying to achieve.
So you're telling me that your report still publishes KPTs and KPIs? It certainly used to. It used to.
So we moved away from what I call operational KPIs, which some of the inspections, which I understand your colleague.
This comes to the question of transparency,
so
doesn't it?
The transparency. So what we moved to was trying to be much more outcomes focused because we wanted to try and demonstrate the impact that the inspection and regulation had.
If you're not publishing the KPTs and the KPIs, the outcomes are what you say they are rather than what people can see for themselves and assess objectively, aren't they?
It's more the fact that we are trying to focus on for the money that we spend on behalf of the taxpayer, the outcomes we're achieving. But I take the point that it would be better to see some more clarity around some of the inspections to support
Presumably,
that.
though, you hold that data.
We do, yeah.
But you choose not to publish it. Why is that?
It's more in keeping with it's demonstrating the impact and outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We're trying to say that, this is the impact
better way of demonstrating it than publishing it?
I guess...
Why did you stop?
Because we wanted to focus... Our way of performance reporting in the MMO was to drive forward the demonstration of that we weren't just activity focused. And I understand from your colleague why you would like to see further activity detail. That is the operational data we use to manage the business. So we do track inspections and I would say operational activity. We were trying to, through our publishing of reporting, was meet a different standard of kind of describing what we were trying to achieve in terms of outcomes and impacts.
It sounds a bit like you're marking your own homework here.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I can understand why you can come to that conclusion. The reason I don't agree with that is...
Tell me why I'm wrong. I'm genuinely wanting to get to the bottom of this.
So, because the National Audit Office review all of the performance of the organisation, I'm held to account by the Minister and the Department for for the activities that the MMO does. So we do have activity analysis, but in our publishing of the annual report and accounts, we focus on the outcomes we're seeking to achieve in congruence with the environmental improvement plan. That doesn't mean that data isn't available.
As a government body, you account to your government department.
I do.
And you tell what you've done. You do that obviously to the National Audit Office, because everybody's got to do that. But if you're a fisherman or just somebody with an interest in the industry, how do they know if you don't publish it?
We do publish other data sets for the industry. We publish a lot of fisheries data sets that come through the fisheries statistics analysis about the activity that the fishing industry do. We do publish other information more broadly around what the organisation is doing in activity, but we haven't been, there was no deliberate or conscious reason not to publish the numbers of inspections, and we do talk to it in the narrative of our annual report and any reporting that we do.
Again, it's your conclusions on your data, but nobody else gets to see the data.
Well,
would you provide that information for the committee?
I can provide that. I will come back to you with the data on fisheries. Is it the fisheries inspections particularly, or all inspections?
I think inspections and outcomes, the information that you used to publish in your annual report would be of interest, I suspect. Jane, you wanted to come in?
It's okay.
Okay, right. In which case then, we're going to move on to the third section in relation to spatial squeeze. Tim, you've got some questions on that.
Thanks. Thanks, Chair. And just before going to spatial squeeze, I do have a question, since we've touched on it, about the for the Crown Estate, if that's okay, on new leases, and just practically, what are the steps when you're providing or developing or granting a lease for the seabed?
Yes, happy to answer. I think it's fair to say our process has evolved over time. Part of that is in recognising and learning and understanding the challenges that the marine environment is facing, and hopefully it provides for a nice segue onto coastal squeeze. So through time, I should also clarify, with respects to the offshore wind sector, in order to run a fair and competitive process, we run structured tenders to lease the seabed. For other sectors and other interests, there are different mechanisms. There are licensing arrangements for the aggregate sector. They have exploration agreements where they better survey and understand the resource they wish to extract, and then they have production agreements with us. And all of those different sectors have different lifetimes of agreements and rights. With respects to offshore wind, we have evolved over time, and the work that we're doing through route map in the designing of the platform is to best understand where we might see future opportunity and where the optimal locations are, guided by policy, but also guided by evidence on balance of all of the different competing needs and demands. So when it comes to leasing for future, we will draw on the work from the route map and the contributions other sectors have made in order to design then what we ultimately put out to market.
That's the future. I'm just interested practically today, when you're deciding to grant a lease or not, how do you take into account marine protection or the concerns of fishers, for example, in an area? What's the practical...
Sure. Yeah. Nature's actually a wonderful example, because just today we have published our guiding nature principles. So again, that'll be something that we use through route map to guide us in with respects to where we believe the best locations are for nature in order for nature to recover. And that's very much work that we wish to do collaboratively with others. The evidence base that underpins route map has existed for the long term.
Okay.
Yes.
So practically, how does it feed into the process? I'm just thinking, if there's a new wind farm in Henry's constituency being proposed, what's the practical step for engaging with local fishers or with the local wildlife trust or what have you about the impact?
Yeah, and I think that's where historically the process has evolved over time. So we've had multiple rounds of leasing. We will have engaged nationally. Historically, we will have engaged with national bodies, national ENGOs and others on where the locations were that were being leased. the reason I look forward is because in recognising the constraint over the sea space, we very much want to focus on what does this specifically mean for our region, our locations onshore, and how something very far offshore might have an impact. And that's why I looked and talked to route map, because we're using that vital engagement mechanism with fisheries and others to make sure we're considering the onshore. And not to mention, other government-led initiatives, working with NESO, the electricity system operator, to coordinate the grid network. All of these things will form, and the work being done through policy will form inputs to then deciding how we would lease a future wind farm in a particular location.
So is it fair to say that there weren't many practical steps being taken in the past to consider marine protection and local fishers' interests when you were granting seabed licences?
There were many steps, there absolutely were. Okay. We are always guided by...
What was a practical... No, I'm just trying to... What...
So engagement process. So we would talk to our intention at the outset. These are the objectives we're trying to achieve by leasing seabed, and then we would engage multiple different sectors on what that meant for them and how their perspectives could be incorporated. We would use spatial analysis tools. We would incorporate data and evidence. We would be guided by policy targets and ambitions as well. So there were multiple practical steps, as well as then the regulations around our role as a competent authority under the habitats regulations and assessing impacts we would have by running a plan on marine protected areas. So there have always been a number of practical steps taken in a process of designing what goes out into a lease. We are now trying to take a system approach, which is why route map is trying to address the spatial squeeze.
I think it's fair to say that if those steps existed, they received a lot of criticism from fishers and marine protection organisations. I mean, presumably that's why you've introduced the marine route map, so that you can actually approach this issue in a more balanced way.
I think route map is trying to address the fact that we can't take decisions in isolation, any one organisation with decision-making rights. If we're wishing to do something in the future, we have to recognise that there'll be multiple demands over the space. So that's really why we're guiding and using route map and developing route map. In the past, the engagement has just been multilateral, which drives for a more complex process of engagement. I think those steps did exist. It's just that we're trying to drive a more open and collaborative approach to how we work going forward.
Can I check so I don't get this wrong? This is the marine route map, that isn't the marine delivery programme, or is that the same thing?
Yeah, the marine delivery route map. It's just called a programme because it's in development, so we're evolving. How will that factor in existing fishing activity on the seabed and balance it with net zero and nature recovery objectives? That's where the engagement and the collaboration with fisheries is so important. So whether that's the national bodies, the fish producer associations, or the regional or the local bodies, they are contributing to the evidence that route map will use. Yeah. So it's an engagement-based approach to making sure that we've got evidence that truly reflects where fishing is happening, but also where future opportunity for fisheries
because I'm saying this isn't I represent an inland constituency, so this isn't an area I know well, but I was looking up response to the marine delivery route map from fishing organisations, and I suppose FLOW is your main group, isn't it, for liaison with these organisations, and there was a lot of criticism that the route map, when it was originally launched, didn't take account of fishers properly.
I think this was the point that was made earlier with respect to if we put maps into the public domain without extensive engagement, they can cause concern and alarm. Yeah. I think we're learning all the time on our approach and engagement. FLOW is very effective forum, so that's been in existence for 15 years. It's the Fishing Liaison Offshore Wind and Wet Renewables Group, and that's fisheries chaired and led, and it gives the opportunity for developers and fisheries to work through where we want to see best practice, and actually addresses some of the concerns around cabling with best practice guidance, that kind of thing.
And it issued new best practice guidance in November, because I was looking at some of our Scottish parliamentary colleagues' concerns about how the Crown Estate has dealt with this in the past, and they said that in the past there'd been excessive disruption to fishing, a poor relationship and communication between commercial fishers and offshore wind development. There hadn't been a proper assessment of the cumulative impact on marine protection. So it sounds like you're catching up, that actually it was poor practice in the past, and now the route map, etc., is trying to fix what was a bad situation?
We'll always continue to listen and improve where we can.
Can I ask all of you, sorry, rather than focus just on the Crown Estate, I didn't make the trip to Brixham that my colleagues did, but they heard about a lot about spatial squeeze and the concerns that people have, and it's fair to say that this has been on the radar for well over a decade in any case. So can I ask you what efforts, and perhaps starting with you, Colin, what efforts are your organisations making to think about this issue and maximise co-location between different sectors?
So we don't have a statutory role within that type of process, but I suppose two things I'd say. One is Seafish traditionally has had a, let's call it a convening role between industry, often between industry and government, or industry and other statutory bodies. So we can help on that front at a very basic level on that convening role. The other point I'd make is that Seafish has been involved for a very long time in geospatial services, which we've been involved for the last 25 years or so in helping the catching sector with them mapping out what's on the seabed. Now that arose out of work primarily with the oil and gas sector originally, but we've been doing that really since about 2000. So that data that we hold can help widen the understanding of what's on the seabed. We've worked very closely with the fishing industry for many years to help them avoid hazards on the seabed and so on. So while we alone, we are not the major player on helping resolve the spatial squeeze, we do have data, we do have expertise to bring to the table to help organisations like the Crown Estate and the MMO and representatives of the fishing industry. We work very closely with the NFFO and the SFF, so it's Scottish Fishermen's Federation, on what we call Kingfisher work. Very happy to make the committee, very happy to give written briefing to the committee on that particular project. As I say, it's more that we hold a lot of data from our historic involvement in mapping the seabed and in helping the industry avoid the various hazards on the seabed.
Thank you, Michelle.
So co-location, coexistence is a key topic for the marine planning team. So we have the 6 marine plans, and we've built co-location into the marine plan policies, and the marine plan. Our marine plans map not only existing activities around fishing, navigation, marine protected areas, but the future needs of offshore wind. So we do try to work and bring that data together to help people get on the front foot of when, where opportunities can exist together. A lot of our expertise more recently has been supporting the Crown Estate in the delivery of the route map. So the the DEFRA Marine Spatial Prioritisation project was key to that. We used our expertise to help inform, and those relationships we have with coastal communities and fishing industry and others to kind of inform the delivery of this, it's trying to get that balance of certainty and flexibility into the plans. So we have fully engaged with that and worked through the workshops to bring the communities and fishers into that. And fishers do engage through those workshops, and we do help get their inputs in that way. But that was the involvement of taking the marine plans, the marine spatial prioritisation. Yeah. The earlier plans, so the East Marine plans currently under review at the moment, was less specific. So we are trying to bring greater specificity into those marine plans to help people understand the policies and the choices that can make and where they can do things differently. And I just finished by saying I think there is still an opportunity to go further, that we can do more place-based work. So again, we're trying to evolve that, and we're thinking around pilots that might be able to kind of better bring that together. It is a continuing evolution. And we've got, there are challenges to that, to spatial prioritisation.
And can I just check, did you feed into the November 2025 North Sea plan that the government published?
Yeah, so we have been working closely with some of the various consultations and North Sea plans, and we have, even through the FMP work that we've been doing, contributing to, just bear with me a moment, We have been working with the North Sea Basin and others whereby we're trying to kind of bring the competing natures together. We cannot work in silos of marine planning, marine licensing, you know, and in development. We have to find a way to bring those things together. And to be fair, I think at this point in time, it's safe to say that we just don't have, you know, a single clear agreed system of framework that steers decision making, but we are working towards that, and we are working very collaboratively towards that. But we do have good tools there that will help on that journey.
The North Sea Plan didn't include any reference to fisheries or the marine environment in it. Isn't that quite odd?
It doesn't mean that we didn't feed into it.
Yeah.
But
I'm not saying you didn't, but
no.
Are you not concerned that the North Sea Plan didn't mention fishing or marine protection?
It's something that would need to that is interesting.
You mentioned the Marine Spatial Prioritisation Programme. So again, in an area that I don't know much about, I was interested to discover it was first mentioned in January 2022 by government. You've mentioned it now. It's been mentioned in numerous government announcements, evidence, etc. There doesn't seem to be a single publicly accessible document that tells us the scope of it, what its objectives are, what its outputs have been so far. Have you seen anything?
We've seen a lot of the detail that has gone into the documents that have informed decision making, because we supported in the MMO a lot of the modelling that will help inform decision making for things like offshore wind, and where, you know, those activities could be better placed. So that there are, you know, we have fed into those documents. But as I say, it was a DEFRA-led MSP programme, and I think they would have to advise whether or not that there is a report that could be shared.
When we're talking about spatial squeeze, do you not think 4 years on, actually there was a Lords amendment January last year asking for them to publish a plan, because of course this interacts with the Environment Act and lots of other things. I mean, do you not think it would be timely for them to finally publish a single document?
I think, yeah. I think it's difficult to say. I think because everything is still continuing to evolve, I think the Marine Delivery Route Map is probably one of the key documents that does try to bring these things together.
And spatial squeeze and the Crown Estate, how do you take it into account?
Thank you. So I suppose we've spoken about flow in terms of the group, where we are trying to ensure that we're taking into account the fact that one size doesn't fit all. There are other convening groups that we've brought together with support from the fishing sector and the offshore wind sector, and working with the aggregate sector as well. So in particular, in the southeast, in recognising some of the earlier constraints we saw on sea space beyond the growth everywhere. So that's just been a kind of flavour over time. Things like best practice guidance is really helpful in supporting co-location and coexistence on, and this is very much led and contributed to by the sectors themselves. So fisheries and how they might continue to operate whilst an energy developer is looking to survey the same space. Safety is obviously critical, and we support in notifications, notice to mariners, etc. as well. So there are some practical ways that we are supporting the sectors in understanding how they can work and coexist. And then from a co-location perspective and planning to the future, the guiding principles and getting agreement around those, what best practice looks like, and where we're seeing a recognition that certain sectors are under stress, like the fisheries sector, and how we need to ensure upfront and not just at project level that their data and evidence and their perspectives are being considered, so that we can design collaboratively rather than something being done to them. So I think, you know, there are a number of different ways that we're wishing to bring that to life through our investment in evidence, the extensive engagement, and then publicly sharing the information that we have available, so that we can work openly on the decisions we take from that.
Would you, I mean, a question to all of you, would you support a sea use framework in the same way that we're working towards a land use framework?
I don't have a particular comment with respect to whether I'd support one or not. I think we recognise we have to work in a coordinated way, absolutely, in terms of sea use, and ultimately we are guided by policy. But the delivery and how we coordinate the delivery, that's absolutely what we're trying to achieve through route map. We'd be very supportive of anything government brought forward to encourage more coordination around sea use.
Is the Crown Estate in favour of a sea use framework? And it's been an idea that's been knocking around for quite a while.
I don't have a particular comment on the sea use framework. I don't know.
You don't know if the Crown Estate has an official position?
No,
on
I can follow up.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
I guess from my perspective, I believe that the marine plans play an instrumental part in facilitating a sea use framework. I think with the work that will evolve on, we bring the policies together, and with the work that we're doing with the Crown Estate, as Olivia alluded to, kind of doing much more upfront activity. I think these will continue to evolve. I think with so many competing government strategies for use of the marine environment, it's finding an opportunity as to when is the right time to do something like that. But I think we should really look at the tools that we already have and see if we can use them to better effect. As I say, the plans, I think, provide a really firm and sound basis in order to which you can make choices and make decisions about the use of sea. But as Olivia said, we can't do it in isolation. We have to work together with it. And that's not just within government. I think it's within the place-based communities. And hopefully, as I alluded, we are thinking about a potential pilot in a place-based. That might give us greater evidence of utility. I think the frameworks in themselves are good, only if everybody will use them in the right way.
So you don't have a view. So your view is still being formed, or
still being formed. I think because we're so involved with the work that we're doing to kind of bring greater specificity into the marine plans. We're reviewing the East Marine Plan, which was one of the early ones, and some of the other work that we've been evolving with MSPRE. It's trying to work out the best way to bring these things together. I think there's still some further work to do in this space, and I think over the next 12 months we should, through other pilots, be in a place where we can, I guess, come up with another evolution of the solution with marine plans.
Yeah, look, Seafish doesn't have an official position on whether that would be something that government should do or not. If government decides to take that forward, we'll play our full part in making it a successful document.
Do you have a personal view? I mean, you had a long-standing senior role in DEFRA.
I don't have a personal view on it, no.
I didn't expect that set of answers to that.
I'm not getting any great sense of urgency here, Michelle. I'm not getting any great sense of urgency in relation to the development of policy on this.
There is an urgency in that that we do need to support better decision making, and but because there are many government bodies and many users and decision makers. It is that there isn't a single.
Which would be why a framework would be good, but never mind, let's move on. Henry, you wanted to come in?
I just wanted to have a quick question to Olivia, just in terms of what's just been outlined with Michelle, in terms of the amount of different competing interests on the coastline, and do you think it's right? I mean, the Crown Estate is a sort of quasi strange body, isn't it? I mean, it sits between the public and the private. It's essentially an independent commercial business. Realistically, do you think it's right that kind of organisation should have such level of power or autonomy over something that is effectively acting within the national interest and lacks that lack of strategic oversight?
So we're absolutely accountable to Parliament, and we are guided very much by policy, and in publishing and sharing openly the evidence and the considerations of other sectors that we don't have responsibility over. What we're trying to do is take a sustainable approach to where we do have responsibilities. So I think the role we're trying to play is recognising
that lack of responsibility, I think, is the key point, isn't it? Is your lack of responsibility over other aspects and those other aspects might be critical to the national interests, and that there's a lack of alignment between your own interests independent commercial organisation and the national interest? And do you see a tension? Do you see a tension there?
So, with respects to how we're guided, so our value creation framework, we recognise we cannot do our job without considering the responsibilities and the needs and demands of other sectors. So we would not be doing our job well if we were to ignore the needs of fisheries and food security, defence and other security needs. We cannot do our role with respects to how extensive it is over the seabed without considering others. So the tension may come from the fact that there are multiple competing needs over the sea space, but not with respects to how we take our decisions and how we engage. I believe that's vital to us demonstrably showing that we're taking sustainable decisions on the things that we ultimately then do end up leasing and licensing.
Olivia, you mentioned a few minutes ago the aggregates industry. The aggregates industry, I think, takes something in the region of 20 million tonnes a year out of the seabed. Is that about right?
I'm happy to follow up in writing
on something
the
of that nature. Yeah. Now, you're stopping bottom trawling in stage 3 MPAs because of impact on the seabed. What constraint is being put on the aggregates industry to do their share if the seabed is so important?
The aggregates industry is absolutely critical parts, the contribution they make to
what
the
are you
construction.
Doing to reduce their impact on the seabed?
We're working collaboratively with the sector to understand what their future needs would be. So there are a number of existing production licences. In terms of the publication of the guiding nature principles that I mentioned earlier, they will help support our work and engagement with the aggregate sector in understanding where future locations may be better for production in future.
So they'll still be allowed to take the same amount from the seabed that they do currently? Can you understand why I take this line of questioning? The aggregates industry are paying you for that extraction, aren't they?
They do, yes.
Yeah. But the fishermen are not paying you because they're principally about the biological resource in the sea rather than the seabed. Does it seem fair that if we're genuinely concerned about the seabed, that the aggregates industry carries on in this way, but the fishing industry are the ones who get impacted?
The aggregates industry are a regulated industry, so we work with...
I think fishermen are probably fairly well regulated as well.
Yes. With respects to how we can support, I can only talk to how we can support the aggregates industry in looking at future opportunity, the production license.
Doesn't this kind of highlight the root of the problem here? So you do your bit, you do the Seafish thing, but actually there's no coordination at all, is there?
I think that's absolutely why we recognise the need to work in a coordinated way.
This has been going on for years. It's back to the point about the lack of urgency. Meanwhile, the fishing industry are the ones who piece by piece by piece get squeezed out of the sea, isn't it?
Absolutely recognise the pressure and the demands on the fishing sector.
Anyway, I've started intruding on your space, Jeremy. Coordination on marine planning.
Yeah, that's fine. I think Tim pinched some of my points as well, but that's quite all right. We can share. I just wanted to go back to, Olivia, the conversation about flow. Just to understand this properly, fishing liaison and offshore wind and wet renewables group, because that seems to me absolutely crucial, because offshore wind, I'm from Norfolk, offshore wind is absolutely key where we are, as I'm sure it is elsewhere. Could you just confirm for me what the role of that group is and what impact it has, because it's been going for a long while.
It has.
How does that work?
Yes, so it's a group of organisations who come together from the fishing sector and from offshore wind development community. It is led, so we invest in it, so we fund the chairing and we invest in some of the research that comes out of it. That grouping meets on a quarterly basis, I believe, and they agree on what the priority topics are, where they see a need to interact. So spatial squeeze is a critical part of that. How do we coexist? How do we co-locate? Historically, we have seen concerns from the fishing sector over surveying of seabed and how vessels might interact. So some of the best practice guidance that we've seen published is to help support and then seek alignment from the wider community around it.
Okay, can you give some examples of where that group's had an impact? What's it sort of, any practical examples of what it's altered or changed or
yes,
added value?
Thank you. So the best practice guidance around cabling, I think, has been beneficial to both sectors being held to account for the things that are more impactful to the fishing sector or not in the approach that the cable industry might take in laying cables. So that's one example where that piece of guidance is used by the sectors and that we ask it is used by the cable industry in minimising impact for fisheries. But I'm very happy to follow up in writing to the committee with a number of other specific examples.
Yeah, I think that'd be really useful because I think it is quite key and increasingly so, I'm sure, in the years ahead. I wanted to sort of look at the marine planning aspect because, as I mentioned, I'm from Norfolk. We've got offshore wind. Just down the coast we've got Sizewell Sea, obviously in Suffolk, and I think we've heard today around the sort of competing priorities around coastal erosion, solar. We've got an awful lot of solar farms on the coast in the eastern region as well. I'm really keen to understand how your different organisations work together to address the spatial squeeze, because obviously you've got competing priorities, same short space geographically, limited amount of coast. How do you work together? If I start with Michelle, I'll just give you a break, Olivia.
No problem. So if I can just go back to what I set out around the marine spatial. So we have, as you'll be familiar with, we've had the East Marine Plan. That was the first plan that was published in 2014. It was an early adopter and it wasn't very specific. So as we've gone through the next generation marine plans to help bring together the knowledge and the changes in government policy and different competing interests from other departments, we have worked a lot more closely with the Crown Estate to try and better, as a system, better work through, well, actually, if you're going to, plan for the seabed and who uses the seabed, we have to regulate that. We then need to understand which we need to be more forward-leaning and forward-looking in so much as understanding what the competing interests will be. And gathering the data to inform that's really quite key. Some sectors, as you would appreciate, have greater levels of data that has been able to play into some of the marine spatial prioritisation. Others have had less so, and fisheries is one of those areas where the data isn't as good as it could be to support them, and that's something we're working with the fishing industry with. But working together, we are trying to better organise this, because you're right, previously we were siloed as organisations, but actually as the marine plans evolved, and bearing in mind the last round of plans were only published in 2020, 2021, it kind of means that the world keeps moving on. The trick that we're trying to deal with now is how we keep pace together with that. So shared data, shared information, shared stakeholder engagement, but actually trying to put the decision to try and put a framework in place that better deals with that decision making will be helpful to that. But our collaboration isn't just about how we work together as government organisations. We work with groups such as seabed user groups. We pick up needs with those. We work closely with NFFO, Cornish Producer Organisation, and other producer organisations in order to kind of try and gather up as much of the interests as we can. When we do run the workshops, particularly in the marine plan areas, there are 6 of them, we do work really, really hard to get as much local interest and local authority interest into those plans, because sea and land meet in that coastal estuary, which is another area of challenge. But what I would say to you is that the work that we've certainly done over the last 24 months has kind of changed the way in which certainly the marine delivery map has gone forward, and I think that's quite important. But actually we are getting, in many regions, quite a lot of engagement, because people genuinely care about what happens in their space. And I think that just requires the consistency engagement. So coming back to the earlier point in the session, that is why it's important for the MMO to have a disciplinary skills in those place-based field officers that we have, to make sure that we can meet all of the different needs in those areas, like the East.
Okay, thank you. I think, Colin, you're probably in a sort of unique position given your background and experience. How do you feel the organisations work together?
Well, I can only comment with respect to Seafish. Look, we're a smaller player when it comes to spatial squeeze issues and resolving those issues. We don't have statutory functions in the way that, say, Crown Estate or MMO or other bodies have. What we can do, as I say, is make available to colleagues the data that we hold, which, as I say, comes about from a different source. It's really about our historic engagement with the oil and gas sector and with representative bodies in the fishing sector. We can make that data available so that colleagues are able to make as informed choices as they can.
Okay. Thank you. Anything you want to add, Olivia?
Just, I suppose, with respect to the coordination in our roles, we're very much guided by the statutory plans, and that framework of statutory plans and the policies that underpin them is critical to then determining how we deliver into the seabeds management space. So that's core to how we align, and then we work practically and consistently, whether that's inter-stakeholder groups or on shared evidence base, to support then our distinct but respective roles.
Thank you. Michelle, I just want to go back to coordination internally with government, because obviously DEFRA clearly has a key role, but also DESNES, for example, increasingly so with renewable technology. Are there any gaps or weaknesses in terms of government departments, in your view? What's your frustrations with the departments that you're having to consult with and engage with?
We don't have frustrations with them because we already have sort of programme boards where we bring together cross-government bodies such as DESNES, Department of Transport, Department of Business. We bring all of those bodies together because we have to work together. They all have competing interests. We have different legislation which is running through currently. There's the Planning Act. So we've got to kind of work together in those ways. And what we try to do internally as government is through recognises those cross-government interests, is where the MMO is in that unique place where it can bring together those organisations to kind of have these discussions, of which the Crown Estate is part of those discussions too. And that's the way, to be fair, that we've developed all of the marine plans. We've worked in that cross-government way, so we've tried to, as far as possible, ensure there is at least those interests being pulled together in the same way. So there isn't that kind of frustration because we are invested in that way of working internally, because we recognise the imperative really of change that is going on when government changes or when Secretary of States change or policy changes. So we've got to kind of be switched into that space to understand what's going on.
Okay, so you're happy with the sort of level of respect that other government departments are giving to the MMO?
Yes, I am.
Good. Okay, the other point I wanted to ask was around essentially what happens when people in organisations fall out, because there are so many different competing priorities. I mean, I focus a lot on energy, but actually environment and fishing is equally important. Olivia, how do you prioritise those competing interests, and what happens when different priorities fall out? What's the sort of arbitration process?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to reference that is why the Marine Special Prioritisation Programme was established by DEFRA. So we do actually sit on the programme board. It's not meeting as frequently as it did previously, but the mechanism through that cross-departmental opportunity to bring together those those departments, and if there are any particular competing policy priorities, it is then for the relevant government ministers across those departments to determine which should take precedent in any one location. That has been our guiding and our ability to escalate any concerns that we might have in early design and development of route map and the evidence base that underpins it. That has been our mechanism for that. It is also why we are seeking to invest so much into route map, to look as early as possible in a interests life cycle, to tease those issues out as early as we can, so we don't end up in there is a project and a specific fisheries that is impacted and a particular project that is being developed that causes concern. So I think that system level approach is what we're trying to address, is how we're trying to address those early opportunities to de-risk and de-conflict, as opposed to getting to the point where we need to very specifically work out what to do in any one location.
And do you suspect there's going to be an increased amount of conflict or decrease, given the competing priorities?
Yes, yeah. So we have the two things in hand. We have a continuously constrained space and probably more demand than we will ever see out to 2050. But we have a fantastic opportunity by working in a framed way, in a system-shaping way, where we can plan ahead and plan for the long term and have a shared evidence base to support it. And certainly that's the ambition and the objectives through route map, is that we do deliver in a coordinated way, and that we can invest in understanding where there are evidence gaps or in the engagement, extensive engagement needed where there are competing priorities.
Thank you. And just a final point, just going back to one of the earlier questions, Michelle, around sort of capacity and skills, and you mentioned in your previous answer just then, actually having the right skills is important. Does the MMO have the capacity and the skills to cope with these competing priorities moving forward?
In terms of the expertise in the organisation, we have really good experts, and we do have good capacity in those experts. I think as we move forward, we may need different skills, because I think the bit that Olivia's kind of inferring is there is a greater need to use data better in a different way, and I think that's one area which we certainly in the MMO are thinking about, which is, you know, how do we improve data systems, and then how we get that data out and use it in a better way, so not just the MMO can use it, but actually it's a shared way. So the way we see things going forward in the future is working much more in partnership with sectors such as we've trusted partnerships with fishing industry bodies like NFFO and CFPO, that, you know, we work better with them to kind of get the data improved, so that, you know, not just for fisheries but across a piece there is a better way that we can pull data in and use it in a more intelligent way. And come back to the urgency and pace, that will help with pace and urgency, but those skills are the skills that we are continuing to evolve and develop as we go forward as an organisation. It's not just about people, it's those sort of
doing things better.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Just on that point about the NFFO, you conceded in correspondence with the NFFO, did you not, that in relation to the Stage 3 MPAs, that the economic data on which you had based your decision was not reliable?
Yes, we did.
You did. What are you doing about that?
We are working through all of our data sets currently, and we're working with industry on those data sets.
When will we get an outcome on that?
We're still working through, I think, the 23,000 consultation responses on Stage 3 MPA, so I'm not at the point that conclude, but I can provide an update.
On this point about collaboration, Olivia, you can send something that's got environmentally damaging consequences. So, Michelle, you then designate another area of sea as a compensatory MPA, is that right?
If I may, so the production agreements we award are only after they have all of the statutory permissions they need. Yeah. So they're very much guided by regulation.
Yeah. So compensatory MPAs?
So the marine protected areas and designations that we have are part of the MPA network. Can I just clarify, you're talking about marine
compensatory MPAs.
Yeah. So we do look at that and look at the way in which any permission that we give for any activity in the seabed where it could have damage.
You understand why fishermen feel that's a double whammy? They're excluded from the area where you've consented, and then they're excluded from the area where you have designated as a compensation.
We may permit them to do activity in that area, but maybe with specific gear types.
I mean, if you think stage 3 MPAs, a complete ban on bottom trawling, is that correct?
It's one of the proposals of those measures, yes. But the confirmation of stage 3 is yet to be completed because the consultation is still open.
Right. So if that proposal goes ahead, that's a double exclusion.
Could be, depending on the outcome of the other evidences in the consultations.
You can coordinate in that way because there's a financial take for the Crown Estate, but the people who lose out are the catching sector again.
As I say, I think I would have to take that away and look at what stage 3 would relate or not.
Right. Who we got to? Jean, sorry, apologies.
Just a quick question for the Crown Estate before I move on. I want to talk particularly about the new Coastal Growth Fund, which is very exciting. But quickly for the Crown Estate, I think what we're trying to kind of grapple with a little bit is people find it difficult to understand the whole entity of the Crown Estate and what it does, because essentially it's kind of a public but private company. It makes over £1 billion profit per year. On top of that, it takes £27 to reinvest. It owns a lot more than the seabed. I mean, there's a lot of parts of London, all sorts of land. And it also now has the right to borrow, will do when the Crown Estate Act comes in. So I suppose my question would be, we talked about public accountability. Who decides what investments will be made where by the Crown Estate? For example, the Crown Estate have decided to invest in the floating offshore wind supply chain, but why not ports? Because ports would benefit the country's infrastructure and also the fishing community as well. So my question is, who makes those decisions, I suppose, and how are those decisions accountable? Because you said they were accountable to Parliament, and apart from talking to us here, how else is the Crown Estate accountable?
So we, and I can follow up with the details in terms of the mechanisms on our accountability to Parliament, because I don't have all the detail in front of me. We publish on an annual basis the activities that we've been doing, the investments, and then specific case studies around how we are investing in the activity that we are delivering, and we use that annual reporting mechanism to showcase publicly what we are doing, and we land our accounts in Parliament as well on an annual basis in alignment with that reporting. The abilities that the Act has brought in are fantastic, as you say, in us being able to take more of a system approach as to where might there be benefits in us investing in enabling, for example, supply chain.
Would those be financial benefits? Do you have to make a return? Because there's nothing in the Crown Estate Act to tell you what you have to invest in.
Absolutely. So we're guided by our strategy, and we publish our strategy as well, and the priorities that we have, again, are guided by both the policy requirements and the needs over the marine space, as well as the markets and the demands and the uses of the sea space too. In terms of specific investments in ports, we actively engage with ports around the UK, and I wouldn't be able to give you any details on the specifics as to whether we would invest in a port and on what basis, but I'm very happy to follow up in writing on that.
I suppose you can just see the public good. You can see all that money there, which we think goes to the Treasury. It's a question we've asked about how the split goes, but it could be used to improve infrastructure for everybody in the country in a different way. So I suppose my question was about that, really, and accountability.
Thank you.
Sorry, do you want to?
Well, I was just going to say, also, as part of developing Route Map is trying to drive some of that investor certainty. So we're trying to attract investment in understanding where future opportunity might be for various sectors as well. So we're hoping,
as well as floating offshore wind,
in being able to demonstrate where opportunities are and where particular important areas are. We hope that it does stimulate that cross-sector interest, and we're looking and focusing on place as well to understand how we can make targeted and supportive investments in particular places too.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. I wanted to talk a bit about the Fisheries and Coastal Growth Fund, which is really positive, 360 million over 12 years. Previous funds may not always have been so well spent, may not have made their way down to the smaller fishers, the smaller boats. What reassurances can you give, I'm asking particularly, I suppose, the MMO really, that this will be administered in a better way this time? And do you know yet who will be doing the administering?
So, in terms of if I can just come back on the performance of the previous grant schemes, I kind of would like to draw out that there was quite a lot that has gone to small scale fisheries and across the piece. So, certainly over the 15 years I've been with MMO and been responsible for these projects, we've seen something to the tune in England over 140 million be distributed. So, and that's not a small undertaking. And even since 2021, we've had 1,100 projects in small-scale fisheries, which are about 17 million. And so I do think we've tried really hard as an organisation.
We went to Brixham, and I'm from Cornwall, so that's really from talking from the people
but I
in
think
the
we
industry.
can provide more generic, more specific data, of projects and stuff like that in the historic schemes, and the schemes have gone really, really well previously. I think it's been huge focus on health and safety, which is really important, labour force and growth in the industry. So we've tried through the various schemes that we've had to achieve really good outcomes with that and improve the way systems. In fact, we do provide great services to those that struggle with systems, because not all fishers kind of prefer to use systems, and we do provide that one-to-one support. The details still being worked through on the fisheries, the new fisheries growth fund. We do think that MMO will be taking forward the scheme and administrating the scheme, and we will start to deliver money from 2026-27 onwards through the existing. We'll be using the mechanics of the current FAS scheme. We do think at this point in time, but it's still to be confirmed, there will be a continued focus on labour and workforce enhancements to health and safety, partnerships and strengthen trade and market access. But those still they still need to be worked through, and until this.
How are you setting those priorities? Is that through
engagement? Will be setting those priorities. We will be providing data into DEFRA for them, and as will other devolved administrations, because the funds will be.
DEFRA will set the priorities.
DEFRA will set those priorities, but it'll be based on engagement with not just the MMO, but with other industry stakeholders as they develop the fund. But it's still being finalised.
I wanted to do it. I will do a quick plug because I'm from Cornwall as well. So. The Cornish Fish Producers Organisation obviously has an idea of what they would like to do with it, so they've looked at science and research. We'll talk about data collection later. Careers, the young fishermen have a great apprenticeship scheme that they'd like to see off the ground. Infrastructure, I'm going back to ports again and harbours, but that is a desperate need. And local seafood promotion, that kind of thing. So they've got an idea of a pilot that they could run in Cornwall. Will those kind of ideas be part of the mix? Will they be considered? How involved are you in the design, or are you simply passing the engagement up?
Oh, we will be supporting DEFRA in the design, certainly for England. And
I'm glad I've told you about the Cornish plan.
My leads work really closely with Chris Ranford and colleagues down in Cornwall, as along with other organisations across England. We'll be drawing in as much insight as we can to make sure that those needs are reflected in. I think up until that point, I think given it's a 12-year programme, then there will
it be
be
front-loaded? Will it be spread out along the 12
It's still to be confirmed.
Okay. Can I ask how involved Seafish are as well?
Yeah, sure. Look, we have a slightly different function from the MMO on this front. But I think primarily we will be, I suppose, in two ways that we're keen to be involved. And I should say also, I think I agree the CFPO does really excellent work in this space. I suppose two ways that we'll be working with DEFRA to understand how we can be involved, and I think we're still working through exactly how we can be involved. But there will be some projects and activities that Seafish will be happy to deliver on behalf of the fund. So, for example, on the previous fund, we were involved in trade promotion work. There was a strand of the previous fund which was dedicated to really significantly increasing the UK's footprint in trade shows around the world. And I understand certainly from the publicly available information that's a strand of activity in the new fund that will continue to be taken forward. Again, we will be very happy to assist DEFRA in taking forward their ambitions on that front. Similarly, again, from the publicly available information, we know, and Michelle's mentioned safety skills, training and so on. That's kind of bread and butter work for Seafish. Again, we're very happy to assist either DEFRA or any of the devolved administrations as they take forward as they take forward projects in that space, either helping them design projects or delivering them. But I suppose the second point I was going to make was I think there's a role for Seafish, specifically on your point about making sure that a wide variety of businesses, whether it's small, large, a wide variety of businesses can access those opportunities under the fund, whether it's convening partnership approaches with, I'm just thinking of skills and training. We already do a lot of work with University of Lincoln with respect to the processing sector in Humberside. But there is, I think there's an opportunity for organisations like Seafish to help bring together consortiums, bring together organisations, large or small, to bid for projects that will genuinely have the type of impact that I think the fund is seeking to achieve.
Yes, thank you very much. I suppose to push it a bit further, the fund is to support coastal communities as well. We know in Cornwall that one fishing job supports 15 in the local community. Do the MMO have the resources to kind of develop the fund further? Do you think you have the resources to run the fund as a whole, fisheries and coastal communities fund?
I think we'll need to impact that when they decide on what the design of the fund is going to look like. I guess they'll be looking to focus on what they want to achieve in year one and then develop from there. At the moment, we've got good resources and systems that will support the fund launching, and after that, I think depending on how broad they want to go with it, I think we'll have to look at that and impact it. But we'll obviously be keen to make sure that we do it in probably the most effective way, but the one that has the greatest impact.
And I suppose as a final question, the important thing for the fishing industry is to grow, but of course to be resilient. It's a bit like other sectors like farming, where they have very little control over so much. So how do you think the fund can best be used to increase resilience and maybe even encourage growth? I mean, some of the ideas from the Cornish Fish Producer Organisation are there, of course, but you must have ideas yourself as well.
I suppose if I make a start with the conversation, so I know the organisation has been engaged just historically with Chris and in the Cornish Fish Producer Organisation and others. I do think resilience, it's not just about the infrastructure and support. Firstly, I'd say don't forget the day-to-day stuff that is needed. I think health and safety is one of the key areas, and I think it's one of the most dangerous professions that we know of. So therefore, that continued investment in keeping people safe and keeping fishers safe is really good. I think the supply chain matters, and providing skills and training throughout the supply chain is quite important. We do recognise it's an ageing profession, and therefore how do you make it effective? And again, Colin will probably speak a little bit more to that, and I know Chris has got his ideas around that. I think resilience is going to come from improving data systems and in the way in which we engage. And I think for the industry to understand the power of its data is kind of quite important, from capturing what it's catching through to where it catches it is going to be quite key. So I think building and working in partnership and in a more coordinated way will help, not just Cornwall but like fishers more generally across England. So I think there is things that we can take away and develop, but I think my key change on this would be that it's got to be done in partnership. So partnership's going to be quite key for both the industry, communities, and for organisations and government. Those partnerships are going to be key to get better outcomes and get better solutions.
And that's maybe where Seafish can help.
Yeah, and I think agreed. Resilience will be strengthened via all sorts of different routes. But to highlight two, on the skills front, you will have a more resilient sector if we are able to retain people within the sector as much as possible, as well as attract new people into it. So skills development has a whole massive number of different facets to it. The fund appears to be, as I say, from the publicly available information, appears to want to focus on that type of issue. But I suppose the other area that I would highlight is you have to sell what you catch as well. Market access, opening up new markets, commanding better prices for your product will help the economic resilience of any port and any community, whether it's Cornwall or anywhere else. Again, the fund appears to be wanting to focus on that area. Seafish, we've been heavily involved in that type of work in the past, and we look forward to assisting government on that in the future if that's the direction of travel that DEFRA ultimately takes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
We're going to move on to our agreements with the European Union. Charlie, you're going to
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I come to you, Colin, on this specific point, the government's obviously talking up a potential SPS deal in terms of trade for the seafood sector. What's your assessment of that potential deal?
Look, industry, a variety of sectors of seafood industries tell us that they're keen to see that deal taking place. We know from a number of sectors that export health certificates have been or the cost of export health certificates has been a burden on the sector. But just generally the red tape that has tied up some of the system, many sectors of the industry are looking forward to seeing that being disentangled. So we will, I suppose Seafish's role within it is to support the industry understand the outcome of the deal. And we have a regulatory affairs team that works very closely with DEFRA and all sorts of parts of government, so that that team can then help demystify some of these things to industry as and when the deal's implemented. But I should also say that further upstream, we do work with government to make sure that they have the best possible understanding of the industry and the complexity of the industry as they are negotiating and taking forward that SPS deal. I'm clearly not cited on the mechanics of the deal and the negotiations themselves, but our role is to make sure that they understand the variety and the complexity of the sector as best we can.
Thanks. And just very briefly, in terms of the new EU import requirements that came in on the 10th of January, are you actively supporting the industry on that? You mean the new import requirements from the EU that come in on the 10th of January? So, yes, we are also, likewise with MMO colleagues, we're working very closely with them. Our role is really to amplify the communications that have come from the MMO and from DEFRA on that front. But again, our regulatory affairs team have been very heavily involved in fielding questions, trying to answer those questions, but doing it in a properly coordinated way with MMO colleagues and with DEFRA colleagues. Thank you. And just sort of moving on to that, Michelle, in terms of the sand deal dispute that you've had with the EU, how has that affected working relationships with Brussels from your perspective?
We don't do that direct engagement with the EU in Brussels. We do it through DEFRA, so we will support DEFRA in any of those activities. We just don't have that direct relationship. We will interact with Europe on sort of an operational, practical level around control and enforcement, and where we've got shared sea space. But on that level, we just don't do that interaction. We will work in and feed information to DEFRA to support their discussions and deliberations on that. So it would be DEFRA that would lead on all of those discussions and outcomes.
Thank you. In the interest of time, Chair, I think I'll...
Thank you, Charlie. We're going to move on now to evidence-driven and collaborative fisheries management. Josh, you have some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think my questions are more for you, Michelle, and Colin. As you've heard, in November, the committee had the chance to visit Devon and Cornwall, and we had the chance there to speak to people in the sector, which was incredibly useful for us. They told us about a long-term trend of rising regulatory demands, fragmented policy making, and limited engagement, I'm afraid, from DEFRA. Fishers in particular described the administrative burden on small vessels becoming unmanageable, and some are even with a heavy heart considering decommissioning. So we heard loud and clear from fishers in particular that they want more meaningful input in policy decisions so that regulations can work in real-world practice. So how can you make sure that things are done with people rather than to them?
I think the fisheries management plans is somewhere where I think we have made real progress. So the fisheries management plans, we are working much more joined up with not only industry but with DEFRA to try and come up with plans that are meaningful for the sector, that deal with those specific species which can be managed far better and in a sustainable way. The working groups, through working groups and the regional fisheries management groups, will bring those insights in. So you're not just then looking at the data, you're actually looking at trends in fishing practices. And we are seeing different takes upon key stocks and changes in fisheries, which I'm sure you're going to come to. But because we don't have that policy role, it actually allows us to do much more of that engagement with the fishing industry to get their inputs into those plans. I think getting the fisheries management right is quite important, because then it leads on to how you then regulate. I think we are aware of the challenges of it. Is fisheries regulation is a challenging regime. It's evolved over 40 years or more, and we are trying to be more conscious and considerative when new policies are coming forward. Certainly we've got to work through the process of dealing with the technical measures coming out of the recent negotiations. We are working much more closely with policy to be more thoughtful to, okay, then what does this mean and how does this land in the existing fisheries regulatory regime, and we're trying to support fishers with how they can comply with that.
Just to pick up on that point around direct engagement though, as you said, a lot of this is very technical and it's quite a fast-moving picture in many ways. Fishers haven't got the time or often the inclination to be sitting behind a desk, as many of us do. How are you, I know that you are physically located in many ports, but how are you kind of making sure that you're engaging directly and reaching the right people rather than just those who are already well engaged?
So we are close to many of the ports, and we do move around. So to be really clear, just because the MMO we do, as it happens, have an MMO office in Brixham, but actually that office does provide marine officers that kind of move around the stretch of that coastline. The regional fisheries groups, and the way in which we engage on a monthly basis, is to bring all of those parties together. Equally, the jurisdiction, say, of the IFCAs, we do have an MMO representative on the IFCA committees, and I get regular insight reports that come through from the industry that gets shared with DEFRA, and we use that insight to bring that together. So far, we've been, from an MMO perspective, we've been working really closely with industries, largely through not just with individual fishers, but through industry groups. So we've been working closely with Mike at the NFFO, Chloe from the UK AFPO, and the acronyms, apologies for that, and Chris from the Southwest. And the reason for doing that really is to kind of ensure that we can get into a more forward-looking programme of work for the forthcoming year, so we can improve engagement on a wide range of matters. We met before Christmas, and from an MMO perspective, and DEFRA colleagues with us, we have heard that, there is a challenge on, fielding the multiple consultations and, how we can better engage them and make best use of their time. So we have taken that away, and that is a recognition that, things need to be done slightly differently.
Okay.
So we have things in place to deal with here and now, but I just wanted to give the committee reassurance we are working with those representative bodies to find different ways in which we can improve that and keep the engagement going. The key is going to be data, though, and I think, I come back to it, I think we need to improve the quality of the data that flows from the fisher through the systems that are, that we use to make, regulatory decisions.
Okay, sounds promising. And Colin, from Seafish perspective.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I think we recognise and hear many similar things very often from particularly from the catching sector, but probably also some of the processing and aquaculture sectors too. So look, we completely recognise that. I think, I suppose our role is to try to help build those partnerships across organisations, whether it's organisations like ourselves, but also try to get beyond the representative bodies as well. Those representative bodies are hugely important, of course they are, but you're right to point to the challenge of getting beyond those organisations to talk to people on the ground. Certainly that direct engagement, we do that within Seafish. We have people on the ground in different parts of the country, but certainly in my role in the future, I'm very keen to look at what more we need to be doing in Seafish to have meaningful direct engagement with people on the ground rather than tick box engagement. That's certainly going to be a priority for me. But you're right that we need to do more on this front.
Michelle, can I just turn to kind of data again? So when it comes to things like total allowable catch, we know that that's got a huge impact on fishers, and data provided by fishery scientists can often be months or even years out of date by the time that it is actually fed into fisheries management decisions. The fishers we spoke to expressed frustration that what they're catching in their nets often doesn't bear resemblance to the data that's feeding into those TACs. What can you do to make better use of real-time evidence that's being gathered by fishers?
Well, I'm not sure if the committee is aware, the way in which fisheries data comes in is threefold. We get data through A-logs for over 12-metre fleet. We have the catch app. I'll come back to the catch app in a moment, which picks up, more average data from the fleet in real time. And for the 10 to 12 metre, it comes in paper records. There is a time lag in the data, and there are, on occasions, more often than not, anomalies. I think there's a statistic where I think over the last year, the MMO corrected some of the order over 10,000 records. So there is a need, if the industry really want to embrace more timely data, we would like to work with them on that, because actually the quicker we get the data, the more accurate the data is, then actually receiving that electronically would help everybody, not just the MMO, to have a better, more real-time view of the world. And I think, fishers should see what their data is, and I think without the infrastructure. So we, in the MMO, we are working within the department to make bids for investment in that space and put business cases forward. It's not just for us, it's for the benefit of the industry, to try and get those data and system improvements in place. So we are working quite closely with colleagues in DEFRA to kind of improve that. The catch app was really innovative of its time. It was a bit of a struggle but now the industry really like it. But we were aware in the last 12 months there's been glitches with it. It's just been capturing some report records and not others. Our digital colleagues in DDTS in the department are working with us on a discovery to kind of see whether or not we can fix that app to make it better, whether we need to replace it, and hopefully I'll be able to share some news on that over the coming months as that gets assessed. But, for something that was difficult to accept, it's actually been a win, and that will help. I just can't emphasise enough the importance of getting good quality data and data that's accessible to all, which will be instrumental for all the systems that we run, whether it's for trade and access or for regulatory decision making and in sustainable stocks.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I'll hand back to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Josh. Sarah, we've done quite a lot in protecting marine habitats. Do you have more to come up?
Just one question, I think. It has been mentioned before, the OEP has consistently raised concerns about the slow pace of action in the marine environment, and your own MPA programme is currently off track. I also understand you work with a lot of different agencies and it's all about corralling, but so what are you going to do to get back on track and sort of keep this in progress?
So in terms of the MPA programme, we are delivering that on behalf of DEFRA. So we put in place stages 1 and 2. They're implemented. As I said earlier, the stage 3 consultation closed, and we had an unprecedented number of comments back on that 23,000. So we're still working through a lot of those comments, so we can put a recommendation to DEFRA on the proposals for stage 3, and we are currently working through stage 4. So there had been a change in government. We've worked really hard to bring it back on track. As I say, I think that the stage 3 is the one whereby there has been a significant and unprecedented amount of interest, and we've got to respond to those comments in a proper and appropriate way before we can make a recommendation to the department on what those measures should be.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Well, unless anybody has anything else. Okay. So we're very grateful to you for your attendance. This is part of an ongoing inquiry, and we shall be returning to it again in the not too distant future, but your evidence has been enormously helpful to us in the course of that. So we're very grateful to you and thank you for your attendance here today. But for the moment, this concludes our proceedings today. Order.